Oh, I ain't worried.
Yeah, nobody. No pressure.
Here, look, we're loading right now. All right, we should be. Y'all look like a nice bunch.
Hmm.
Y'all look like some fighting warriors. All right, I believe that we are live. I believe we are broadcasting and live streaming across at least four social sites. So um we can kick it off. Bush.
Great. Welcome, welcome, welcome everyone to Coalition Family Unity's live, going over the bills that we are carrying this legislative season. That is AB 2709 and AB 2959 on vending, food, and visiting. I'm Portia Taylor, founder and executive director of Prison from the Inside Out, a nonprofit that runs rehabilitative programs in prisons across the state of California, and a proud member of Coalition for Family Unity. Super excited to be here with y'all this evening. I am going to pass it off. This is what we do in our private spaces. So we're going to do it the same in our out loud spaces. Popcorn to all of my lovely co-hosts who have joined me tonight to introduce themselves. And I'm going to pass it to Danny to start off.
Ooh, thank you, Portia. I'm Danny Gray, and I'm part of the Power and Unity Fellowship, but I'm also part of SE Justice Group and a few organizers. But I'm really excited to talk about these two big bills and just happy to be here and just show what we're fighting for. I'm going to go ahead and pass it to Angel.
Hi, everyone. My name is Angel Rice. I'm the co-founder of Empowering Women Impacted by Incarceration, also supporter of multiple organizations. And I will pass it on to Christina.
Thank you, Angel. Hi, everybody. I'm Christina Brown Mendoza, and I'm the current executive director of the Place for Grace. I am also with the Felony Murder Elimination Project and many other organizations across the state of California, where we not only go inside, but we also push policy and we work with children and our incarcerated loved ones. I will pass it over to Sandra.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sandra Suarez, and I am the Executive Director and founder of Jesse's Place organization, and also a proud member and of Coalition for Family Unity. We're also in support of different organizations. Thank you for having us, and thank you for allowing us to be co-hosts to this webinar, and I'll pass it over to Lawrence. Thank you.
Hey everybody, how you doing? Welcome. I'm Lawrence. I am Regional Advocacy and Organizing Associate for LSPC, and All of Us Are None. And also, I'm currently interim CFU coordinator.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Shout out to all of our awesome panelists who gave up their time to educate y'all on the amazing pieces of legislation that we are pushing this year. So before we kick off, wanted to just go ahead and do a reminder of exactly what CFU, the Coalition for Family Unity, is. So what we are a large lump sum of organizations, social justice organizations from across the state of California that have come together to propose legislation for the betterment of incarcerated people and people impacted by incarceration. That is the shortest, quickest way to say it. We're a group of people that are impacted and are closely related to people who are incarcerated and are impacted by incarceration that want to make the prison system in California better. No easier way to say it than that. If there are any questions about what else we do, please drop them in the chat or interact with the social media page, Coalition for Family Unity on Facebook. And with that being said, I will pass it off to Lawrence so he can kick off talking about AB 2709.
Okay, AB 2709, first bill that we'll actually cover tonight. With AB 2709, I guess I can give you guys a brief history. A lot of people, this is a visiting bill. A lot of people probably remember it from being AB 990. AB 990 actually passed both houses and actually went to the governor's desk and was actually vetoed. It was brought back as AB 958 last year. And of course, it stemmed around removing barriers to visiting. But the main component was we sought as a coalition to remove these various barriers by restoring visiting as a right. made it through the first house. It got to the Senate of Appropriations, and it died in the Senate of Appropriations because the bill didn't get called out for review in time. This year, AB 2709 is largely a piece of AB 958. But instead of seeking to remove barriers by restoring the visiting as a privilege, I mean, restoring it as a right from a privilege, we're just seeking to prevent visiting from being used as a punish mechanism while we remove those barriers. I can give you some breakdowns of what this bill actually does. We start with the barriers that we're trying to remove when it comes to the application process. We know there are a lot of issues and a lot of problems when people try to apply to see their loved ones. We also understand that this is one of the mechanisms that not all staff, not all facilities, but a lot and quite a few utilize this barrier to prevent individuals from being able to see their family by having unnecessary requirements and then unnecessary denials with extended and excessive long periods. So one of the main components to this would be to keep that from happening by requiring that when a person fills out an application, all they have to do is put enough information for Department of Correction to identify them, and then allow CDCR to utilize the Department of Justice records on their own to decide whether that person can be approved for visiting or not. That way, that removes the possibility that a staff member can say, okay, well, you forgot to list arrests that you never got convicted of 30 years ago, so we're going to deny you for 6 months. Those type of absurd and unusual denials and abuse of discretion and power is what this part of the bill is attempting to remove. Also, this part of the bill, that part and section of the bill would prevent those excessive denials. If a person was denied for whatever reason, well, then the person would have anywhere from 15 to 30 days to be able to reapply and give the information that was necessary and the information that was needed. Another component to this bill is it's actually codifying the 3 days of visiting that is on the budget right now. Currently, there's Sub 5 committee has allotted money for 3 days of visiting and made it possible. Right now, any administration can come and take that and change that and remove it back to 2. With this bill will codify that and prevent that possibility. So it would solidify those 3 days of visiting. Another major component to this is removing the barriers that exist when a staff member decides that they want to necessarily punish an incarcerated individual by removing their visits and preventing them from seeing their family. Now, of course, this is one of the main pieces because we prioritize rehabilitation. We know rehabilitation is damn near impossible when you, excuse my language, when you alienate those that are incarcerated from society. So this bill would prevent CDCR from being able to utilize punishments, visiting as a punishment for something that did not happen in the visiting room, or for something that is not an egregious offense that potentially threatens the danger of that incarcerated individual or those around him, i.e. A1 offenses and A offenses and B offenses. We all understand when you do get charged with those crimes, until they're adjudicated, you are in administrative segregation. This bill will not ensure that if you're in administrative segregation or commit one of those violations, that you are still on the main line and get the visiting. This is just preventing a staff member who say they didn't like the way that you had your shirt tucked in, or they didn't like the way you talked to them. So because of the issue, or they didn't like the way that you keep filing misconduct against them and their staff, and now when you have your hearing for 115 for one of those things, they decide that they're going to take visiting from you. This is what this part of the bill is intended to remove, and not allow visiting to be utilized as a punishment. When someone gets in trouble and they're allowed to go back to general population in the carceral system, guess what? They don't take AA from them. They don't take NA. They don't take their college courses. These are all other rehabilitative courses and that individuals need to help rehabilitate themselves. So why, if we have visiting, why would we prioritize taking visiting, which is one of our most important rehabilitative tools, away for punishment, as you know? So another component that was different, we can, if I can stick with, actually, there's 2 components that's different. Forgive me. One of the components that's different is the family visiting units. Family visiting units are units that are constructed and put in a facility and they're used to conduct family visits. Now, family visits are those visits overnight between an incarcerated individual and his close relatives, whether it's his spouse, his mother, his brother, his grandmother, his sister, etc. This bill does not seek to change the definition of those that can get those visits. This bill does seek to restore the units that were made for those family visits to the operation and the custody of the family visiting units of the visiting department. Right now, in a lot of facilities, sometimes over half the units that were erected to facilitate these visits are being used, are being monopolized and infringed upon by medical staff, by border parole hearing, or even by ISU and their canine units. Neither one of those have anything to do with visiting, and the aforementioned behavior and activity is actually intrusive and presents barriers. So this bill seeks to restore those units back to continue to facilitate the operation, the effectiveness and efficiency of the family visiting program. Another apparatus of this bill that it wasn't there in the last two forms is to remove strip searches. CDCR once had probable cause as a standard that would allow CDCR to strip search an incarcerated individual's loved one and their families. They recently attempts to change their regulations themselves to change it from probable cause to reasonable suspicion. Now, reasonable suspicion is a much wider, much wider perspective that actually gives staff members greater discretion to abuse that power. A lot of women of color are actually targets of these searches to dehumanize, to embarrass, and to encourage these visitors not to come and visit their incarcerated loved ones. Some women, if they're not compliant with these searches, they'll be refused visits. And some of them, if you come back again, they will tell you because you didn't accept a strip search the last time, either you let us strip search you now, or you won't be able to visit your incarcerated loved one. So with this regulation change, we prioritize removing CDCR's ability themselves to strip search and having them exhaust every other necessary remedy before they even decide to strip search, especially kids. And that's one thing that a lot of people don't know. These strip searches and inhumane strip searches are being utilized on our kids as well. So we're attempting to ban them, period, especially if we do see strip searches, we would like to prioritize us seeing them doing by an outside law enforcement agency if necessary, and medical staff as well, if necessary. Bill is a lot. I think I covered a lot, but it seeks to do a lot to something that we really need to uplift, which is visiting. So, Sandra, you think you might be able to touch on the need for this bill? Like, why do we need to be pushing this bill? Why do we need this type of advocacy done and this type of policy, for this?
Yes, thank you, Lawrence. So I'll speak from the heart, and if I get a little emotional, you'll understand why. So for those that don't know me, again, my name's Sandra Suarez, and my husband, Jesse Suarez, served a total of 15 years in prison. He has been out 1 year. And in our family visit, we were, blessed and a miracle that we were able to conceive my daughter, Zoe. I bring that up because visiting is it's very important to make sure that we're there as a family, as families, as a support system, so they can rehabilitate, right? But a lot of us use the word as rehabilitate very loosely, but at the end of the day, there's times where they don't have like that connection with us during the week, but they would see us during the weekends. And it's very hard and very sad, because at some point I was denied being able to enter into a prison due to being told that I had omitted information on my application. And it took 5 months for me to be able to get into the prison. So I know that we're all full of stories. We all have our own stories to tell, our own journeys to tell. But at the end of the day, it doesn't take away that they need us, that we need them, that they're our husbands or our brothers, our fathers, or our mothers and our sisters. It doesn't take away from who they are to us. So what we do as committed, as families, as wives, is we show up. We show up to let them know how much we care, how much we love them. And for our case, after I had my daughter, I made sure to show up for her. I made sure that, you know, a lot of the times you get criticized for things like that. Oh, you had a child while incarcerated. Well, I didn't know I was pregnant until I was 6 months. And after I had her, he met her at 3 weeks. And when he met her at 3 weeks old, it's something I'll never forget because he had been incarcerated. We were just friends. And I was, you know, I fell in love with him. It just grew into something more. And so after I had her, he held her and he looked at her and he was like, whoa. He goes, this is a piece of me. And this is what I did. I removed myself and I continued on this journey with Zoe until she was 4 years old. She stopped going into the prison system. And the emotion behind for me is the strip search part for the kids, for the women, the pregnant women. So for her, she learned to get on the floor and take off her shoes and take off her sweater and to put her little shirt up and see, she would say, I got nothing, you know. And so she did that up until she was 4 years old. And for me, she would like literally run up there and knew the process, right? And get her little plastic container. And that's what she would do. And so it's really important, all the aspects of this bill, all the connections that we have in the family visiting units, especially because some of these prisons are out 120 days on family visits, 90 days on family visits, when we all know that some of those family visit units are being used for the dogs, are being used, you know, for other purposes than that. One of the important factors, it's important to me, and I'm sure it's important to the other women that are on here, that some of our husbands did get released. They are out here. But some of them, their children are still going into the prison system, are still going through it, are still showing up for their fathers. And at the end of the day, that doesn't minimize our work. It doesn't minimize what we're trying to accomplish for those that are still left behind the walls. That's something that I brought up, you know, is that, like, can someone give Lawrence back his 17 years in prison? Can Jesse get back 15 years in prison? No. However, we use them as an inside source to educate us, to educate me on my husband. Now he gets to hold Zoe, right? But it doesn't take away from the fact that she runs to the window and she says he's taking too long. And so it made me realize how important their connection was. And the last thing I'll share is that he taught her how to potty train through figures, through drawings. He taught her how to potty train through drawings at the visiting room. I have those, you know, I was going to bring them up, but I noticed that it wouldn't show the pictures on there. You know, he taught her how to pray. We're Christians. And she knows the Our Father, she knows Psalm 23, and she prays better than me. And so at the end of the day, their connection in that visiting room, their connection at family visiting, their first meal together, their bonding together, their pictures together is something that it's going to forever stay in my head. So what happens is that I see the hard work of all the people, not just on this call, but behind Coalition for Family Unity. And we must stand together as a unit so these bills can get passed into law, so they can hear the stories behind the visiting, so they can hear what's good, what's bad about it, how can we change it. Everything's always up for some sort of comments or criticism, but we won't know unless we're able to have productive conversations about changing the situations or what we're not doing right. But at the end of the day, I applaud all of you for showing up today. There's many families that wanted to know and want to know the facts of what this bill does. And I appreciate all of you. Lawrence, you know, it's not the Emmys, right? But I appreciate you so much because you broke it down perfectly, you know, and earlier I was talking with Angel and I was like, okay, we got to get this right. Portia knows I'm a factual person, but at the end of the day, thank you because you took charge and you put it out there perfectly. So thank you, everybody. And I will go ahead and pass it over back to Lawrence. Thank you.
Angel and Christina, do you guys from your want to share and uplift the importance and the impact of removing these barriers that exist that this policy from your own live point experiences? Angel and Christina, sorry.
Okay, I'll share that the barrier to remove the need for you to list every single incident you've been involved in is it's a lot. I know for myself, having a record and being formerly incarcerated, I could remember dates. Could remember dates of incidents that happened in my past. So I was forced to go get a minute order as well as a life scan to make sure that my application wasn't denied for visitation. So to put the ease on families where you're not having to list every single item, every single incident from back maybe 20 or 40 years back for some people would be a significant change for families. It'll also allow for families that are who've been formerly incarcerated, who've been released off of parole to come visit their loved ones that are also currently incarcerated. You know, they've done their time, they've paid their debt. So they should also have that opportunity to keep connected with the family incarcerated. And Christina?
Thank you, everybody, for sharing, Lawrence, for going over all the details of the bill, Sandra and Angel. And oh my gosh, there's so much that I can say that resonates with that. The facts of the bill were laid out. Lawrence went over everything. So I do feel very confident that there won't be any more what's the word? Myths, myths popping out about what we're trying to create. And as Sandra had stated, our personal lives, right? Our personal lives have been targeted because many people, their husbands are released, or some of them, like me, we are no longer married. However, I have a family visiting baby. She popped up on this Zoom just a little bit ago too. And no matter what, my children still see their dad. So there's still things that we are involved in just because we're no longer married. So now that that's out there, I'm single, not. All right, I had to make it a little bit lighter. Okay, maybe not. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, back to removing some of these barriers. Back to removing some of these barriers, though, there is a significant need. And I do just want to highlight that all women and children become targets when they're visiting loved ones incarcerated, especially those who begin to advocate, those who begin to do the IFCs, those who begin to do crafts and things during certain times with the families. We all get targeted for unnecessary strip searches just because we're trying to make it a better place, right? And we realize that the institutions that were here created are to make it harder for families to go and enjoy themselves. Along with being able to visit, if you've had a record, one of the main things that is often people are denied on their visiting application is if they were detained. The word detained to most of us means like we were arrested for something or, you know, at some point held in for a questioning or something. Well, that's not necessarily the case. You can get pulled over for a traffic violation, not even receive a traffic violation, and that counts as being detained. How would you know that that would be on your driver's license? We wouldn't, unless you had some super legal genre and you knew better. We just don't know better, and that in turn to CDCR makes you be a liar. Then, like Lawrence said, you have a 6-month waiting period to reapply. This will also take away other barriers if you were formerly incarcerated, or maybe you weren't even formerly incarcerated. Maybe they looked you up on social media and they're like, "Oh, you run with a flock of gang members. We're not going to allow you in because you may be a threat to the institution." That's going to take that away from their assumption. Also, too, this is going to save women and children on further sexual traumatization during strip searches. far too often things happen that don't need to be happening. There is scanners that can be activated throughout the state that they currently have. There's doctors, there's other ways to go about it. And mainly we want to enforce CDCR to follow the protocols that they have initially lined out and make them better for families all together. And when we refer to this as a family visiting bill, this is because families go and visit. It's great for those who just have, girlfriends and boyfriends and whatever else. That's amazing. But for those people who actually have kids and families visiting, all visiting is important. So please don't misconstrue my words. All visiting is important. But when we say family visiting, we're referring to children and their parents to be able to be together in a setting as a visiting, not as family visiting, conjugal visit. Okay. Totally separate thing. I do want to touch on the family visiting units themselves also being redone. I was just at High Desert yesterday, and I was having a meeting with the CRM inside of a family visiting unit in the master bedroom. And I was like, this is crazy. And they had 4 units completely used for staff. And so many institutions like that across the state are using those family visiting units. We want those restored back to the families so that the families can actually have those visiting units that they are allotted and that are meant for them. I've had great experiences visiting, and I've had absolutely terrible experiences visiting. And we just want to make it better for everybody so that families aren't afraid to go in, that kids aren't further traumatized. There's already so much trauma that the kids go through being separated from their mothers and their fathers, and we need to do better. And that's what all of us here, and there's so many people too that are behind the scenes that aren't on this live, that push every single day to make things better for people across the state as a whole, and for those that travel out of state to go and visit too. We know that there's a lot of families that do that. So thank you for the people that are asking good questions and putting out positive information and, and trusting in us, and also coming and sitting at the table with us too. And here's my family visiting baby. And so, yeah, I'm now going to pass it over to Danny.
Oh, thank you, Christina. And this bill is just amazing because family visit units is just to stress on that. I believe I went to 2 institutions, and yeah, they were never using all 10 for family visits. It was always 5 at the most, and then the other rest is for institution. Talking about strip searching and incidents that I actually have been aware of, it's very hard when you hear stories about people, even with having disabilities, subject to, searching, or with children that have disabilities that are subject to searching. It's really gut-wrenching to hear that they don't even have that capability of even knowing that these are humans with disabilities and treating them like so disrespectful. And it's very, very heartbreaking. That is the worst of the visiting when I think about this bill. And that's why I believe in the 2709 getting this passed. But aside from what all the stories are, I wanted to pass it on to Portia because she has a very story to share, but I just wanted to mention those 2 things. So Portia, if you can share a story.
Oh, my bad. I
Muted.
was saying, Lawrence, you're gonna beat us up because we messing up your agenda.
No, go ahead. Do feel free. Look, freestyle. Do what you, long as we get the information, and that's what's important is
Awesome.
these live stories and
Awesome.
this live experience.
I will keep it very short because I'm down for the agenda, Lawrence. Thank you for putting it together for us. So yeah, just basically in my lived experience, similar to what all the other ladies mentioned, my babies are raised in visiting rooms, so I've experienced great visits and horrible visits. But and what always stood out to me as a person who has a record is how I would get denied. I still, right now, to this day, get denied. If I have a brother that's in prison, my brother-in-law is in prison, and I have several other family members that are in prison. I was raised in a family where the males end up in prison. And if I was to apply right now to visit one of my family members, I would most likely be denied because of my record. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this live, I work in prisons and I can bring pretty much anybody that I see fit to go in to run programs for me into a prison. And I can do that within, a very short period of time of getting a person cleared. So what it showed me is that there is a double standard of how visitors are treated versus staff. When I apply as a visitor because I'm impacted by my loved one because of my own record, I am denied automatically. Yet I can pretty much walk into any prison across the state of California as a staff member and not be denied. And so I completely understand for those of us who have had a life change and, formerly incarcerated, did some time in jail or prison and have to fight the battles to go visit our family member because of the rules that are currently in place in CDCR. And that's all I'm going to share. And I'll pass it back to Lawrence.
I'm actually glad that you shared that because doing the work that we do, this advocacy work, especially when it comes to the public and that those that are unfamiliar with why we advocate or legislative members who don't really have a clue, when you put that story and that lived experience on how it actually affects a person and why the policy is necessary, it gives more light to it. So I'm glad you shared that. Before we move on to the next bill, I think maybe we can clear up any myths or misinterpretation and misaligned facts that may float around about this bill. For one, I think maybe one of the most important ones to people is this bill does not do anything to change CDCR's regulation for those who are convicted of sex crimes. This bill has nothing to do with elevating or changing any of the procedures or the regulations that are there restricting visiting for those who are committed of sex crimes. This visit for especially for sure does nothing to help or help anyone that is restricted from participating in visits if they are guilty of sex crimes against a minor. So just to clear that up, like this bill does not change any of that. This bill does not get in the way of the regulations in the penal code sections that already restrict and prevent individuals with certain sex crimes to participate in visiting. This bill also does not, promise you, it does not expand who's able to get a family visit. So no, you ain't got to worry about it. No one that is not truly aligned with their loved one legally will not be able to come visit an incarcerated individual. If you're not their mother, if you're not their father, their grandmother, or their sister, or their spouse. This bill does not change the regulations of CDCR on who can actually come and visit someone during a family visit. There are parts in the bill that seeks to expand on the definition of a family member, but not expand who can come as a visit, because you have to keep in mind all family members not eligible for a visit. Your uncle is your family, but he not. Your first and your second cousin, they're family, but they're not eligible. This bill does touch on and kind of uplift what other people may consider as their family members, and it's specifically to uplift the rights of those who aren't incarcerated. I think that was kind of intentional because last year the issue with this bill and the pushback we got was because they didn't want the right to visits to be restored. So they didn't feel like incarcerated individuals are humane enough to have that right, and they tried to hide behind the onus that, oh, it would increase litigation. Every bill has a potential of litigation, but when they took it from the right to a privilege a while ago, there's no data that shows there was an uptick in litigation then. But we know the systems that we're dealing with. So we prioritize this bill uplifting the rights of those who aren't incarcerated, who they can't take their rights away. Our Constitution gives us a First Amendment association. So by expanding and trying to increase the definition, we're just simply uplifting, hey, these family members, whether you consider them family members or not, still have their right. And we want to prioritize protecting the rights of those that are still free and still prioritize being there for their loved ones. I think a couple of more. This bill for sure does not take away CDCR's discretion to uplift the safety and the security of their institution. This bill does not stipulate or make it mandatory that some of the most unstable or some of the most dangerous and threatening individuals to either their self or other yard or other individuals on the yard or the staff member. It doesn't require them to have visits if certain regulations that based off their actions says they don't. And just to specify and narrow that down, earlier I was talking about A1 and A2, B1 and B2 offenses were impacted. We all know what these offenses are. Give a clear example. If an inmate was, if an incarcerated individual was to assault staff, incarcerated individual under this bill would not be allowed to go and have a regular contact visit the next day. Because why? Because CDCR's regulations require anyone who commits an A1 offense to be housed in segregating housing. We know anyone in segregating housing is not being returned to general population to get a visit, period. This bill does not spell that out. So for anyone who suggests that or who feels that or wants to uplift that, it's not the truth. And if they want to continue to uplift that after it being pointed out that there are regulations, this is key why you have individuals who are impacted, because they may be more familiar with the regulations than others. So when you have misinformation being floated around by our own CDCR officials, et cetera, people can be able to point out the truth and call them on it. But for sure, this bill does not prevent CDCR from punishing someone who decides to bring contraband into the visiting room, or who decides that they're going to engage in any type of violence in the visiting room. This bill for sure doesn't excuse indecent exposure behavior in the visiting room or none of that. This bill is specifically, when it comes to preventing CDCR from putting up barriers, is to prevent the punishment aspect of allowing visiting to be utilized as a punitive measure for things that have absolutely nothing to do with visiting room behavior that breaches security and any other behavior outside of behavior that would deem a person fit for an ASSEG assignment. Any other, before we move on, any other myths you guys think you can think of that we might need to clear up?
Not really a myth, but every time I walk in the prison, this question comes up, so I'm just going to throw it at you. I tell them that yes, it's going to help. Everybody wants to know if they have a cell phone charge, will their visits still be eliminated per this legislation?
Be totally and completely honest, yes. This bill would require that, because we're attempting to remove all barriers that aren't of a or a B offense and keeping them from getting in the way of visiting. Of course, I understand the cell phone is contraband right now. So is tobacco, so is marijuana. They're all contraband. In our aspect, in our perspective, the potential threat for this type of contraband doesn't outweigh the need for true rehabilitation and utilizing that visiting as that mechanism. Not saying that contraband doesn't need to be controlled, not saying that some facilities may not have issues with controlling contraband, but if that phone wasn't brought in through the visiting room, you caught a person with a phone, we do not believe that that person should have their visits taken, that you should infringe on their right to be with their family. Because you have to think about it. What are some of the main reasons people do have phones? Because prison is restrictive and it infringes on the building of those relationships with their family. So I would hope that, majority of people would understand this, but just to take it a little further, I can't remember a time a cell phone ever came through a visiting room. So if we really want to uplift the truth, if that wants to be an argument, then we would have to start looking at our staff. Our OIG report just pointed to where all the contraband comes from, even including when prison was shut down during COVID. OIG report points to the lack of security measures enforced on staff. It pointed to where the measures was lacking and who was bringing all the contraband in and where things needed to be shored up with. But guess what? There hasn't been a rule or a regulation. There hasn't been anything to address what that OIG report put out. But instead, they always want to prioritize making it difficult for incarcerated individuals and their families. So, of course, the CFU, we prioritize the opposite. And that's why we attempt to advocate the policy that we do. Sandra.
Real
So,
quick, Sandra, so sorry.
no,
I'm
go ahead.
I'm looking at the comments on Facebook, and that's why I'm throwing stuff out there to you. Before you switch bills, can you briefly go over like the A1A and the A12, what that means? Because I don't think some people know the breakdown of like rules violations. And I'm so sorry, Sandra. Go ahead.
Of course, we CDCR breaks their rules violations down into certain categories, A all the way to F, with A being the most deadly and most dangerous, and the F being, the most minimum. C, D, E, and F, you can commit any infraction that in those categories and still be returned to the yard. You can still go to the yard. You can still walk the child. You can still participate in every other rehabilitative program there is. You can go to work. You can go to visit the next day, et cetera, et cetera. A offenses, A1s, A2s, B1s, and B2s are more egregious offenses that regulations feel are deem individuals a greater threat to security. Of course, A1 being anything assault on the staff, murder, anything. We can all go all day to B2s, conspiracies. So A1 and B1, A1 to B2 would be those offenses that for sure we believe that CDCR should not be curtailed or handcuffed when it comes to dealing with those individuals for perpetuating those type of crimes that fall up under that category. And then, Sandra, you still had a question?
Yes, this was a question or a comment or a mythbuster, however you want to call it. But so one of the things that was pretty serious to me, that was said or was that we had a hidden agenda for this bill. And I'm like to face things head on, because at the end of the day, that's what we're here for today, right? And so I just want to give my comment, and then if you could please elaborate on that. But there's about 30 coalitions that form the Coalition for Family Unity, as I've been made aware, correct? And so to me, I appreciate you breaking down the facts and breaking down, what it does. And as I explained earlier, the importance of visiting. And one of the biggest things is the COVID situation. Um, I believe as a nation had never went through something like that. However, 254 men and women died inside of the prisons without their loved ones. And that's where, we're proud co-sponsors, and Portia is the sponsor of SB 1139, which is the Humane Healthcare Bill. And so there is no hidden agenda for me in this bill, because you're making everything so crystal clear. And so I believe that whoever and whenever it does come up again, and hopefully it doesn't, is that we can always go back to this video, and appreciate the time that everybody, all of you, are taking to help the population, our population, the community, to understand that we're doing this for them. And I keep saying it as a recording, because there is no hidden agenda, and we're doing this for them. We're doing this for them. And I'm grateful, because we didn't get to see or touch my husband for 14 months at all, just like everybody else did. He was stuck at the county and then stuck at the prison, and we couldn't see him. And my daughter lost that time without her father. And at the end of the day, I'm just great. You have no clue how grateful I am for this opportunity, for this bill. And I'll pass it over to you, and if you want to comment on it or not. But I just wanted to say that.
I think there's let me check my words. I don't, if to anyone and to all those who may feel like there is a hidden agenda, before a person, I would beg you and ask you to look at the individuals and the orgs that makes up this coalition. Look at the work that this coalition and the orgs that make up this coalition has put in. check their track records. Like do your homework. This org is made up of the coalition is made up of 30 organizations, and yes, LSPC and all of us are none is the lead and coordinated the beginning of the Coalition for Family Unity. So if you want to check your history on LSPC or all of us or none, the more orgs that's been around for 45 years fighting for the unforgotten population. LSPC started as an organization who fought for the rights of women who were incarcerated, who were being forgotten about when no one was doing it. And what it has morphed to now and given seed to all of us or none, like just check the history first of these orgs that makes up these coalitions before you begin to think that we have hidden agendas, because the majority of our orgs are led by formerly incarcerated individuals. The majority of our orgs are made up of formerly incarcerated individuals, and the rest are impacted who supported and insulated and had to deal with the opposite side of the pain and the mishaps and the alienation of the incarceration of their loved ones. And then second, just a basic matter of reasonableness. This bill ain't creating no program for nobody to get no money. This bill ain't creating nothing to funnel no money to nobody and anything. So what are we trying to have a hidden agenda with, except for helping those that we know we've left behind? Like what hidden agenda does there need to be to help those that come from where we come from, that share the same experiences? Even if let's just look at it from public safety standpoint, you can't increase public safety without decreasing recidivism. You can't decrease recidivism without true rehabilitation. Visiting by none, to me, and I know to a lot of people, is one of the most important apparatuses to rehabilitation. And if you've been through this, you understand all the barriers that our family and our incarcerated loved ones go through just to partake in those brief moments that bring us joy, that uplift us, that prevent mental health issues, that give us hope. So when you see an organization and people trying to, this is the third year of this bill, pushing and pushing and pushing to uplift and change things, how can you dare say that there's a hidden agenda? I mean, if there's questions and concerns and misunderstandings with the language, I prefer you ask and be like, okay, what does that mean? Or this is a bit ambiguous. This is too broad. Maybe that's too narrow. And we have those conversations. If we had a hidden agenda, we wouldn't bring those stakeholders to the table while we prioritize moving this bill through the legislative process. And by stakeholders, I mean all those individuals that this bill will affect. And of course, that includes CCPOA, which is the correctionals union, that includes CDCR. We're on the opposite ends most of the time. So if we had something to hide, or if we were trying to, would we bring them to the table and in the midst with us? Would we have open communication and dialogues with them while we're trying to pass this bill? No, we don't. And I don't mean to be long-winded, but that would be my response, y'all, to that assumption that we have something to hide. But I want to move us along. AB 2959. With this bill, it's our vending machine bill. Give a little history on this. This, of course, is the first year that we'll be running AB 2959. And AB 2959, for some, they remember SB 474. We was actually working coalition, some of our orgs with other groups. And we were able to cap the prices of canteen for those that are actually incarcerated. And of course, we know how huge of a burden it can be for individuals to provide and buy their own hygiene and fuel food items while incarcerated. We know the burden that it had taken on to families. Some of them are single family homes, taking care of kids in the absence of their loved ones. And a lot of this money has to come from them, and most of them women. So the price gouging in canteen was an issue, and this bill is a play off that. Simple. The price gouging from our loved ones in the visiting room is even worse. Price gouging in the visiting room, sometimes you can find markups anywhere from 300 to 600% of what you would actually find on the street. But when you think about it, the majority, the average retail markup on the streets usually is somewhere around 15%. There are 31 facilities. You have various vendors, and each vendor may not be a bad actor, and I want to uplift that. But this bill would seek to bring some type of harmony and unity and some type of direction at developing some type of cap on preventing that price gouging. And some people might say, okay, Why is that important? We're talking about visiting. We're talking about building those family bonds. We're talking about that moment in that time that parents have to spend with their kids, brothers have to spend with their sisters or their mother. As a family, one of the things that we do, and history shows us, we break bread together. Being able to share a meal and eat with your family and eat with your loved one is way more significant than some of us would like to realize. It may be uplifted on the streets, but I guess for an incarcerated individual, a lot of people don't feel that incarcerated individuals and their family deserve that or will benefit, to the same extent. But being able to share a meal with your loved one is key. That those moments of joy and laughter, and still being able to fill your stomach and have something to eat. Food is joy. Food is food is a morale. And that's what the Army used to say. Food is morale. So to know that and sit there and intentionally overcharge individuals, families who come to visit up to such a high percent is unnecessary. We are simply seeking to sit there and cap it. We're simply sitting there to seek to prevent the price gouging. It's sometimes it's telling in some facilities because these same vendors that share the food or serve the food in these vending machines are responsible for filling these vending machines, also provide food and vending services for the staff members at the facility at the same time. Now, this is very telling when you charge those that come visit extremely higher prices than you charge those staff members for the same product. Says a whole lot. And that is unnecessary. That is also what we're trying to prevent with this bill. We understand that BEP, Business Enterprise Program, is set up through DOR. Is a program meant to help the blind vendors make a living, make a minimum of living. And we understand that a lot of us are entrepreneurs, a lot of us are business owners, a lot of us have ran businesses or ran retail, been retail managers. We understand that profit still can be made without price gouging. And that's what this bill, AB 2959, actually seeks to do. Is it seeks to remove that enormous burden. Like sometimes people travel for so far and have to pay so much for traveling and lodging, and then you get in there and you have to pay these expensive amounts for food, and it's like we all want to eat. It's Danny, think you want to speak to the needs of this bill? I know you guys can really speak to this bill, especially from a live point experience and these experiences and how unnecessary it could be.
Yes. Families are on here right now and we're all getting ready for the weekend to visit. And the first thing as a mother with kids is how much money I need to survive the 3 days of visiting. When the kids were young, I already knew what they wanted and so forth. And it would just be, I'd have to budget, but not everybody can budget. Not everybody can say, okay, I can put away, $10 or per person on times 3 and you have 5 and it's just like almost $200. I mean, $200 just on food alone. But it is so important. And I'm glad you brought up about the meal because I look forward to sharing a meal with my husband and the kids. I mean, this was our joy. Visiting in general was our joy. This is everything that we did every weekend. Our kids were raised in visiting as well. And Aaliyah would always get the same food item that cost like $9. And then of course, Dad got the same thing. So that's already $18. And so we would eat the same thing for 3 days, but that doesn't include drinks, like the drinks was $2, the chips were $2, everything just adds up. And it's very, very, very expensive. We can easily spend $80 a day times 3, that's over 200. That doesn't include gas, that doesn't include lodging. We were in Salinas at one point. It was a 7-hour drive. You have to make stops. It is a huge financial burden. And the sad thing about it is that sometimes you run out of money. And sometimes we just sit there and just look at each other and just kind of like we just have to survive for the next hour. And when you have kids, you don't want them to know that mom doesn't have any money. And you definitely don't want your husband to know that you ran out of money, because then he feels bad that he ate, and that's the worst feeling when you don't want them to feel bad. And that's what I tried to do in the last 16 years of visiting, is try not to have the kids worry about anything when it comes to visiting, and my husband, because it's such a precious time that we spend So the financial burden of the vending machine is ridiculous. The drink, I'm saying it's so hard because as I get ready for visit this weekend, I have to automatically think about how much I can spend. When I'm visiting over the weekend in Centinela, the food cost is outrageous. But not only that, the food is empty. We go on Sundays and it's completely empty. The vending machines are empty, or it's spoiled, or and it's just like things that we never ever eat. But we're just so hungry because we want to eat a meal that we buy whatever and spend the $15 on the TV dinner that you can get for $3 at Albertson, which is not a cheap grocery store. But that's just an example of things that we have to do. But the reason why we do that is because we definitely want to share a meal. Plus, our loved ones don't have that type of meal inside. He doesn't have that type of like luxury. He looks forward to the pizza. He looks forward to this. And so this vending bill is super important for families. A lot of families visit, they don't, we do this because we want it to be fair. We want them to have a policy in place, that there's caps, and it's 31 institutions, and just make it uniform. And yeah, we did find out that the COs were charged less, and everybody's kind of doing their own thing, and it's not consistent and it's not fair. We've been at 3 institutions and it's just terrible, the pricing. So, and also different types of foods, and I can go on and on and on, to be honest, but I know we're stressed for time, but I wanted to just pass it to Angel because she definitely can share the need for this bill as well as some lived experience. So I'm going to pass it on to Angel for a second.
Well, thank you, Danny. The bill is super important. We have families that are traveling from out of state, traveling over 9 hours away. And we've done the math on just the travels within the 250 miles. Some families are spending in that one weekend over $450 just to visit their loved one. And that includes lodging, fuel, and food for them and the kids if they have children with them. And then imagine those coming from out of state, some coming from Arizona, some coming from Oregon. They're flying in. Some families have reported spending $1,800 on a weekend. On top of, and that's their food included. You have families that are sitting in visiting rooms, not able to afford food. You can see a family of 5 splitting a bottle of soda and some chips and snacks. We've seen families sitting in the visiting room with no meals at all because the cost is high. And then also you have those with dietary issues. I know a family reached out to us wanting to know if they had any food that did not contain dairy because her child had a dairy allergy. There was nothing she can do about that. She couldn't bring any snacks in to compensate for for what's not in the system, in the vending machines. And also speaking for myself, my husband is on plant-based diet, so there are no options in there for him. What he's limited to is grilled cheese and snacks. I'm diabetic. I can't eat snacks all day long. I don't want to eat snacks all day long. So I'm also limited to the items that I can eat in there. So the bill does a number of things. We're wanting to cap the pricing on what vendors can charge. We're wanting to have more healthy options because not all facilities provide fresh food. Some of you guys are fortunate to receive that, but we want to make it available to all families and all facilities. And then we want to make sure that the food is fresh, the food is kept at temperature. We have had families complain that they have gotten food poisoning in visiting rooms because frozen food items being placed into refrigeration vending machines instead of the frozen food vending machine. And these are major factors that we want to make sure that we resolve for all families. And also the issues with losing money in the vending machines. We want to have a complaint system, a viable complaint system, not just, walking out of visiting and saying something, but an actual something that's tangible that you guys can get back. You can write down your complaints, send them in, and that is addressed within, I want to say, was it 15 days we were saying, Lawrence, we're trying to go for?
I think we may have put 30 days in 30 days in there just to let it work its way from CDCR to BEP.
Yes. So we want to make sure that you guys your complaints are addressed in a timely manner. It's, to make a difference and support everybody's complaints and concerns. And I'll pass it back to Danny. She has her hand up.
No, well, I just wanted to share that so the food issue is so huge because you talked about dietary needs and so forth. And so we buy all these food and yet when the visiting's over and we're not done with it, we can't even take it. And we bought it. And so when you have dietary needs, we cannot even bring food in to even like you say, like our children are allergic to peanuts, and so forth. So it's really tough to have families have a good, the thing is about visiting, and this is true for everyone, we're going to visit no matter what, because one thing we won't sacrifice is the time that we have with our loved ones. So yes, we go through this, but it's time for us to really say, hey, it's time to fight this spending. We've been doing it too long. We've been in many institutions where we see so much inconsistency, and now it's time. It's really time for us to really just say, hey, we need to make some changes for the families. And a lot of families will still go to visit and they won't say a thing because they think that they're going to be retaliated, or if they don't want to file a complaint because they don't want to be, this goes back to the visiting, we get targeted and so forth. So I want to let these families know that don't be afraid, because we got you and we're here to support, but don't be afraid to say, hey, vendor, I lost money, I want it back. Hey, your food's this, because we want you to speak up. And so we definitely need you to say, hey, yeah, I did lose money and I do want to say something and so forth. So this is why we're doing what we're doing. This is why we're here to fight. Thanks, Angel.
I wanna add before anyone jump in, like two things I did leave out. You guys did kind of touch on it. The bill also uplifts food quality. There's a standard that in regulations in the governor's code that spells out the type of food in regards to the fat quality and sugar quantity for schools, and we are requesting that the same standard for food and quality in that regulation be met, at least that and better. Food quality is imperative, so that is one of the biggest components of this bill as well, is to improve food quality. It's kind of difficult to get exactly where we want to be when we say food quality, which includes fresher, healthier choices, because CDCR has a way of handcuffing the vendors, should I say, and having certain rules in some facilities that make no sense, and that actually prevents the vendors who may want to bring in fresh produce from being able to do so. So while we run this bill, we are communicating with all of these parties, stakeholders, including the blind vendors who are responsible for staffing these facilities, who are actually under contract to staff and run these vending machines. And the administrative remedies available. Now there's no clear channel for the consumers to complain. This bill also prioritizes creating a channel for the consumer to complain, whether it's loss of money, whether it's staff, whether it's vendor behavior, etc., whether it's food quality, etc. We want this bill seeks to create a process to where the consumer can make a complaint. The complaint is lodged and documented, and there's a process by which each entity has to follow to make sure that it is rectified and a resolution is actually received. And there are regulations in BEP that are supposed to kind of handle that, but if it's not initiated by the facility itself, there is no apparatus or no program to force the vendors to get their act right and or cause them to lose that vendor. I don't know, we can go into some myth busters of anyone, if you guys don't have any other live experience story or that you want to share. No, you guys good. Okay, well, we can go into myth busters for sure. One of the myths for sure, people say, oh, you guys are trying to cap and do all of this, etc., etc. You might run the vendors out. The way we are trying to go about capping, we're not going to run the vendors out. We're in communication with them. We understand their gripe. They understand our gripe. In fact, we've been in communication talking with the chair, and the chair's actually an excellent example that we could share. It's all about making a living, and even the chair himself of the vendors admits that there are some bad actors and that make it bad for the rest of them. So we're not trying to keep them from making a profit. We are only trying to control them and keep them from price gouging our families and our loved ones in the visiting room. The chair right now, we have research that shows that his prices, yes, we keep track of prices. Excellent team. They do that, especially the Power and Unity Fellowship. Shout out to them. So many of us are still in these facilities, so of course we would have access to this. Excuse me, y'all. Look at y'all laughing. Y'all think it's funny. But yeah, the chair himself, we've seen trends where he admits he makes a profitable living. His prices are well within reason. We've proven that. The majority of his products, but his prices are anywhere from 22 to 30% cheaper than all of the other vendors, and he still makes a profit doing exactly what we are trying to utilize this bill to accomplish, which is cap at a percentage of an average of a convenience and grocery stores combined. That's doable. That's real doable. So as far as the fears of running the vendors out, blind vendors right now by law are the only ones that's supposed to have this contract. There are so many other vendors that would love to jump in this and utilize this to make extra income. So if the blind vendors decided that they didn't ever want to participate in this program, there are other vendors that would for sure take advantage of an opportunity to make extra money. So I don't want people thinking that we're trying to run the vendors out, but at the same time, this should be evident and clear by the effort and extent and the limit that we go to make communication with the blind vendors, and trying to assess and look at their viewpoint, what the hangups are, what's doable, what's not doable, and how can we work together to fix and rectify the situation. Excuse me, I had the hiccups. For sure, anybody that says that we're working against the vendors, I just want everybody to know we're not working against them. We're working for the families and the incarcerated loved ones, but that doesn't mean that we have to work against someone. We understand that a lot of the vendors, they service our population, our demographic, our impacted population, and they understand that this is their customers. This is where they get their money. Some of them want to make the consumers happy because these are the people they see every weekend. Some of these people, this is what they do all weekend. Some of this is what they do on the holidays. They come and they service these vending machines, and they're around these individuals and their families. So they begin to see them as human beings. They begin to see in a different light than maybe correctional staff do. So of course, we are not with this bill or in any intentions in the background trying to alienate them, keep them from making a profit, or discourage them from making a living. We're trying to do the complete opposite. We're making every effort to meet in the middle to where we get what we want and they get what they have, what they feel like they can make a living with. I don't know if you guys have any other myth busters that may stand out or any other misinformations that may be out there. This bill is a little bit different than a lot of bills. It doesn't seem to be doing too much to people, but people will still find a reason and a way to poke at it like it's something that shouldn't be done, or they might even feel like there's another hidden agenda from this one too. So I don't know, but Angel.
Yeah, one of the questions in the chat on Facebook is asking, is it true that CDCR does not regulate the prices in the vending machine? Can you explain that to the families?
You are absolutely right. It is true. When I say this what made this bill is so difficult. Like when we first took it on, we thought it was just a shoe in. All right, let's cap the prices like we capped the prices with SB 474. No, it's not what's happening here. CDCR has given away just about all of their control to BEP. BEP is a Board of Enterprise program, which is lodged in the Department of Rehabilitation. Of course, they're both government entities, CDCR and DOR, but BEP actually runs the vending machine program. BEP has contracts to run the vending machine, to vet the vending machines, to vendors, to approve the vendors, and make sure that CDCR via the institution and the vendor are compliant with the contracts that all three sign together. So the price control really is can be mitigated in the Welfare and Institutions Code by dictations to DOR. But what CDCR can do is in their contracts stipulate that contract vendors are in order to be a vendor, certain requirements are made when it comes to quality and certain requirements are made when it comes to prices. Currently, right now, CDCR and the vendors in BEP do not have that in their contracts. So if the penal code would stipulate, which will control CDCR, that your contract agreements with these vendors in BEP must cap prices at a certain percentage of a certain explained or detailed market, and that the price in your contract must require vendors, et cetera, to have certain quality to a certain degree, then that type of control could be given to CDCR. So she's right. Right now, CDCR, because of the vagueness and some of these contracts with CDCR and the BEP and the vendors are 20 and 30 years old and haven't even, and at least the MOUs, and haven't even been reworked. So right now, as it stands and how the contracts are and how BEP has full control just about, CDCR really can't regulate the prices. So, but this bill would seek to put the responsibility on CDCR when it comes to the contracts, because if facility doesn't sign a contract, there will be no vendor, and no matter who BEP finds, if CDC doesn't sign the contract, and if CDC doesn't outline these are the things, are the requirements based off law, we can only have contracts that say this, then they won't, be able to do anything. So, Sandra.
I just, this is a myth buster. So this is just to highlight, that what it takes for these bills, how it's being pushed. There's 4 meetings a week, where there's the lobby team, and you have, your leaders for that. Then you have your legend research, which is an hour and a half. You have your comms and mobilization, which is on Wednesdays. And then you have your core on top of the hour and a half, which is 2 hours and a half, with your core of Coalition for Family Unity. On top of, you also have the lawyer staff, or the staff lawyers, that are reviewing language and telling us, yes, no, research this, don't do that, or so on and so on top of meeting with CDCR, meeting with the BOP, upcoming meetings with DOOR, so on and so on. And so that does not include all the ledge visits where there is 81 assembly members, 41 senators. And so I bring all that to the table to say that we're not just running on fumes. We're not just running on our own ideas. These, of course, a bill is started with an idea, but highlighting that there's a lot of work being put into this, and especially you, Lawrence, leading the Coalition for Family Unity, and leaders that you have in your other groups. So that's a myth buster that I wanted to share, is all the work, all the groups established, and the follow-ups that go along with trying to pass these 2 bills, which take about 9-10 months. And so I just wanted to highlight all that.
Facebook question: do these vendors have to have a food handler certificate in order to sell fresh meals to the families outside of the vending machines? Yeah, that makes absolute sense. I'm not sure if there's certificates. That's a good question. I don't recall any requirement in the BEP regulations in the Welfare Institution Code, and for sure, there's no mention after reviewing. We reviewed dozens of contracts between these entities, and I don't ever recall seeing a food handler's license. But when it comes to serving fresh food, I'm not sure if a food handler certificate would apply. Like buying fresh produce and selling fresh produce, fresh avocados, fruit, fresh vegetables, is different from prepping raw meat. It's different from having to have a handler's license and having some type of certificate to run a kitchen where you're actually prepping food. Some of these vendors do actually run a cafeteria on these vending on these at these facilities, and these cafeterias are for staff and staff only. I am pretty sure those might have to have food handling certificates, etc., because that's way more intimate when it comes to handling in food and cross contamination and etc. But as far as the vendors, and even when they sell food for us outside of the vending machines, i.e. packaging and wrapping them up in clear containers and then bringing them into the facility, then that's different, because that's not preparing raw food. It's not preparing raw food. And yeah, if she's talking about the hot food items, no, I don't believe so, because that food is already being prepared offsite, or either brought from a vendor already and then just being sealed and packaged in something else and then sold to the population and their visitors. So from what I've seen in the MOUs, in the contracts, and in WIC regulations, and just the understanding that they're not preparing and prepping raw food, then I don't think they have to have one for sure. And we're not in this bill at all requesting that they have the access to prep raw food, etc. Okay, someone said, okay, fresh chicken burritos with rice and beans. But that food would still be cooked though, right? That's what we're talking about. So we're still talking about food that's already pre-prepared before it's brought onto facility. Now, we don't participate and be able to eat out the cafeteria for the visiting population. So maybe in the cafeteria, for sure, when they do bring food that they have to be cooked, I think they may have to. But in the vending machine, nothing is ever brought into the visiting room raw. So when we're talking about fresh produce and fresh fruit, once again, there is no permit, I think, needed. I think there are certain guidelines and regulations that that BEP does spell out as far as foods that need to be refrigerated. They're supposed to be kept at a certain temperature, and foods that are supposed to be frozen, they're supposed to keep in vending machines at a certain temperature for them. I know those guidelines as far as making sure that they serve safe food and keeping food that is already packaged at a certain temperature for sure is within the WIC, and which for sure and within their guidelines.
You're right. Sorry to interject, but I worked there, you know, already as an assistant director. So we had 10 departments, and it is unless you're handling the hot foods kitchen like we had, then you have to have one. But if it's out of the kitchen, like for example, like the vendors, I have not read anything of that nature either. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah. And we're not intending to force them to go out of their way to make it more stringent upon them. A lot of people don't know. The vendors are having just as much problems with CDCR sometimes as the families and those that are incarcerated. So CDCR doesn't make it easy for the vendors at all. So it's not like we're attacking the vendors. We're not even attacking CDCR. We just want every entity involved to do better, so we can reach the goals and resolutions that we want, which is providing healthier, safer, and cheaper, and a different variety of food to facilitate our visiting processes, to facilitating, that visiting atmosphere and that experience. Food is morale. Look, food is morale for sure. I can't think of any other Mythbusters, but I know there still will be questions. If you guys, Angel, go ahead before.
I just wanted to clarify that any vendor that prepares food for sale has to be licensed and have their serve safe permit in the state of California. So we do know some of the vendors that are under BEP also have businesses outside of CDCR. So they are required to have a serve safe permit.
Okay,
and then we
gotcha.
have another question asking about Are they allowed to take cash out from families or payments on the side? Um, and is there a guide for pricing for the vendors? Or are they allowed to set their own prices?
Of course, they are not allowed to set Cash App or anything else. They are only allowing money to be brought in, and that money is capped at, is it $70 per person now? If I'm not mistaken.
Adults.
And
$70.
$70 for adults, and what, and 35 for kids or something like that?
Children, right.
40 for,
40.
yeah.
40.
So it's only cash, cash and cash only. With the in the next question, what was the other question?
Is there a guide for their pricing or are they allowed to set their own prices?
Oh, there's no guide per se. They are allowed to set their own prices. Don't the regulations and the contract only says that prices, I think some may say prices are do they even say reasonable? I don't even think they say reasonable. Let me not get the line, but I don't even think they stipulate that it's reasonable, but there for sure isn't a price guide. With this bill, we are prioritizing that they keep it at a certain cap, at a certain not of retail, but a 10% cap. Not we don't want their prices to be greater than a 10% markup from the average price of convenience stores and grocery stores, etc. Within depending on the prison, some in the rural areas we can understand prioritizing a 20-mile radius, and some in urban areas we prioritize a 5-mile radius. And we have to remember that these prisons are in different places. Some of these prisons, you won't have a grocery store or no type of store for 20 miles. So, and then you have some prisons that may be in urban areas, and the further you go out, the more expensive it could be because of that radius. But right there within that prison facility, right there within that confines, it may be a little bit cheaper. So it's a delicate balance with trying to find the right cap and the right radius in conjunction with individual prisons not being at a disadvantage from making a profit, and at the same time not allowing certain institutions to present issues. But we're always working and doing our research, and we're always listening to what the vendors are saying, and the possibility that things need to change or language needs to be amended or added to specifically maybe tweak what's allowed for certain facilities, whether it's based off capacity, whether it's based off population, whether it's based off radius. Of course, we're open to doing that because it's not about hindering or handicapping the vendors or making things difficult for CDCR. It's about improving, the vending process for the families when we do have these visitings. Yeah, we just want them to be fair to the family. And right now there is no mechanism truly dedicated specifically to filing complaints on the vendors. Of course, an incarcerated individual, of course, can file a 602. Someone that's coming to visit can file a citizen's complaint. But the way those are processed, it would have to go through CDCR. CDCR would have to process it, and then CDCR would necessarily have to complain to the BEP, who complains to the vendor, and then whatever the vendor says or does, and then it goes back and it works up the chain. We want to create a process that is streamlined, that is documented, so we can understand what's going on, and one that makes it a little bit puts the consumer up front a little bit more. We're trying to make sure that that's doable. We are also trying to merge it with the existing protocols that do exist through BEP itself. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're not trying to make it too difficult. We just want fairness and improvement. That's really what this bill is about. So in closing, I appreciate everybody that actually showed their face, that actually sit here and watching. Everybody that will later on view this. Of course, I appreciate some of the individuals here who are on the team. This is not the entire Coalition for Family Unity. This is a great bunch. I can give you that. I appreciate you guys showing up in space together with a willingness to kind of educate everybody on what we're doing this year with our two bills that we prioritize running this year. I don't know if you ladies want to say anything. Sandra, you want to, if you guys have any questions, for sure, you can reach out to me. My email is Lawrence. That's my first name, LAWRENCE at prisoners, prisoners with a S, at prisonerswithchildren.org. Yeah, I know it's long, but hey, once again, that's Lawrence, LAWRENCE at prisonerswithchildren.org. You can also hit us up on our socials. Sandra runs our socials with Angel. So you guys have questions. Sandra, you want to shout out our socials for them so they can know where to
Sure.
find us.
Thank you. Follow us on Coalition for Family Unity on Facebook, on Instagram, Twitter, and waiting for the authorization on TikTok. You can also follow us on All of Us or None, LSPC, Empowering Women, The Place for Grace, Jesse's Place, Prison from the Inside Out. You'll see the different coalitions to get tagged. At the end, we're all here for one purpose, and that's to serve the community, the people. Thank you for taking the time, and thank you all for being here. I'll pass it over to you or to anybody else. Thank you.
Lawrence.
You guys, any closing?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you so much, Lawrence, for doing most of this and just enlightening all these all of our families, and I just love being with these group of powerful individuals right here. You know, Sandra, Angel, Christina, Portia, and you, and we're all volunteers. These are all volunteers. No one's getting paid, but I just really appreciate all the efforts and that you folks put into it, and looking forward to some lobby visits really strong on the April 29th. So, and just making things happen. But I just wanted to say, definitely appreciate you, Lawrence.
Of course, I appreciate you guys. It's a team effort. I couldn't do it without you. If I didn't have a team behind me, I'd be miserable. So I can't do it on my own. We all have different experiences, different strengths. We have our lived experiences that really help us along and like kind of really fuels our passion. So, you know, I appreciate you guys just as much. And I appreciate everybody that decided they would show up. Until the next time. Remember, tap in if you got any questions, information, if you want to support, you want to join us on advocacy days, if you need more information, if you want to help spread the word, if you want to uplift the bills, if you just want to say thank you for the work we do, hit our socials up. She gave you everything.